We are in section 6, the practice capability development. There will be 2 Bloom's level 2 questions from this topic in the exam. So we will need to understand the various capability criteria that support the practice capability development. The practice success factors that we dealt with earlier cannot be developed overnight. They take time to be developed and to mature. Therefore, this ITIL maturity model defines 5 different capability levels that are applicable to any of the 34 management practices. These levels are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Level 1 means the practice is not well organized, which means it is not matured at all. It is performed as initial or intuitive or in a habitual manner by the people in the practice. And due to that, it may only occasionally or partially achieve its purpose through an incomplete set of activities. So this means that the processes may not be done properly, completely. Some of the activities could be missing or some of the processes could be missing in this practice or in any practice. Level 2 is where the practice systematically achieves its purpose through a basic set of activities supported by specialized resources, which means starting from level 2 only, the practice is able to achieve its purpose. But in this case, at level 2, these are the basic activities, the minimum required, and the specialized resources are used. Level 3, the practice is well defined. It achieves its purpose in an organized way, and it uses dedicated resources and relies on inputs from other practices that are integrated into a service management system. So while level 2 achieves its purpose through basic activities that must be done, level 3 goes beyond that to organize itself using dedicated resources, and it also does the integration of the information from other practices into the value streams. The suppliers are also integrated at level 3. Level 4, where the practice achieves its purpose in a highly organized way, and the performance is continually measured and assessed in the context of the service management system, which means level 4 is about defining metrics and then assessing, measuring, and reporting them. And level 5 is wherein the practice is continually improving organizational capabilities associated with its purpose, which means at level 5, the practice is periodically reviewed and improved. Let us understand the capability criteria. In ITIL, as we know, there are 34 practices, which are management capabilities, and continual improvement is one of them. Every practice has its own practice success factor, which are required for the practice to fulfill its purpose. And we have seen in the continual improvement, there were 2 practice success factors. One was about the approach to be established. The other was to have effective continual improvement initiatives. And every practice success factor has several capability criteria, and these capability criteria are mapped to the different dimensions of the service management. So we see here that for each practice, the ITIL maturity model defines certain criteria for each level from level 2 to level 5. And these are used to assess the practice ability to fulfill its purpose and to contribute to the organization's service value system. And each of these criteria is mapped to any of the 4 dimensions of service management and to the supported capability level. Of course, the higher the capability level, the more comprehensive realization of the practice is expected. And particularly, the automation happens at level 3 or higher, because automation is possible only if the practice is well defined and organized. Let us now look at the different capability criteria for this practice for each of the PSFs. First of all, we have the PSFs to establish and maintain an effective approach for continual improvement. So here if you notice this table, we have the criteria, several criteria for this PSF. We have the relevant dimension also listed and also the capability level listed. For the exam, you need to particularly remember and understand the criteria against each PSF. So let's look at those carefully. So this PSF is about the approach, and all the criteria have some connection with the approach. So for example, the first one is that the approach for the continual improvement is defined, discussed, and agreed at the executive level of the organization. And the second is that the responsibility for the approach is also clearly defined. The third is that the senior management is committed to developing a culture of continual improvement. Fourth, the continual improvement approach covers organizations and people. Next, this approach covers operating models, value streams, and processes. Continuing further on the same approach PSF, We start from the top. This approach covers sourcing, partnership, and third-party dependencies. This approach covers information and technology. And this approach is integrated with other standards and approaches adopted by the organization. I would like to highlight this entry because the integration of the approach of a practice, such as this practice here, with other standards and approaches of the organization happens only at level 4. Whereas integration generally happens at level 3. Integration of various practices into value streams, integration of suppliers into the practice, those happen at level 3. And integration of information from various sources also happen at level 3. But integration of the practice with other standards, for example, integration with maybe a different ISO standard or other policies of the organization not connected with this practice, that will happen at level 4 only. And then the other criteria here for the approach are that the effectiveness of the approach is monitored and evaluated, and the approach is regularly reviewed and continually improved. So if you notice carefully, with these various criteria are from the various dimensions of service management and also happen at different capability levels. To a minimum for the exam, you must recollect the criteria against each of the PSF. Therefore, you need to look for the clue words in these criteria. So if, for example, if the word approach appears in the criteria, then it is definitely connected with the approach related PSF. But there are some sentences or statements that we noted which do not have the word approach in them, and therefore you need to maybe make a note of them particularly. So for example, we had one earlier that the senior management is committed to developing a culture of continual improvement across the organization. All others had the word approach in them. Then the next PSF is to ensure effective and efficient improvement across the organization. Here the criteria are as following: that the improvement opportunities are identified, captured, registered as part of the normal operation of the organization. Note that this is not about the approach, but it is about the actual ensuring of the efficient and effective improvement across the organization. Another criteria that we have is that the responsibilities for ownership and management of the improvement initiatives are clearly defined and the human resources are available. Next, we have that the management of the registered improvement initiatives follows the agreed continual improvement approach. Then the organizations and people are continually improved. The operating models, value streams, and processes are continually improved. So if you notice this, the criteria here are differing from the criteria for the other PSF, in the sense that these are more about the improvements themselves rather than the approach for the improvement. Then we have the next slide wherein we have for the PSF, the second PSF, that the sourcing, partnerships, and third-party dependencies are continually improved. Information and technology are continually improved. Sufficient funding and other resources are allocated to implement the approved improvements. The improvement planning and implementations are aligned and agreed with each other, as well as with other changes, projects, and initiatives across the organization. Then lastly, for the second PSF, still continuing, the progress and effectiveness of improvements are monitored, measured, reported, and evaluated. And the progress and effectiveness of improvements are continually reviewed and improved. One way to remember this longer list of criteria for the second PSF is that they do not have the word approach in them, whereas the previous PSF had the criteria and all of them had the word approach in them except for one of them, and that was about that the senior management is committed to developing a culture of continual improvement across the organization, which was connected to the establishment and maintenance of an effective approach for improvement. So develop your own strategy as well, apart from what I provided as hints to prepare for the exam properly. There could be a question on the criteria against a certain PSF, or there could be a question on what happens at a specific level. Therefore, that earlier slide about the definitions for the different levels will be useful to you.